Hello, it's Craig here with the breakdown for whips this time. As per usual, the weapon breakdown will be split into unique and regular weapons. For the regular weapons, I'll be splitting the weapon into these categories because of their similarities. If you haven't watched my damage calculation video or soft caps guide, they are linked in the description down below and will help you better understand the optimization done in this video. To start off the video, I think From Software did a great job with the properties of the whip. If I were to summarize it in one word, it would be floppy. It's so floppy you can't backstab with it. It's so floppy your enemies can't parry your attacks. But the problem is, the floppiness of the whip makes it quite difficult to measure the range with a light attack. This is the last frame of the light attack with an active hurt box. The next part of the whip is the retraction and there is no hurt box there. And since the Urumi has a different charged heavy attack, we were afraid its regular heavy attack might also be slightly different. So Catch decided to measure the whips with the light jumping attack while fixing the character model in place. As you can see, the Magma whip Candlestick is especially short, but the other whips are about the same length. The Urumi and the Hoslos are basically 1 pixel apart. And since weapons can have different movesets, it is important to talk about their motion values or damage percent, rather than just their attack rating, otherwise known as AR. The only significant difference for whips is the Urumi's unique charged heavy attack 1 and 2. It is rare for a weapon to have a strong charged heavy attack, especially one as exceptional as the Urumi's. Not only does the attack swing twice, the second swing extends very far and is good at roll catching in PvP. This charged heavy attack is quite the significant difference, since you basically get an additional option as a whip user, while retaining the regular uncharged heavy attack of a whip, which is not bad at all. I believe the charged heavy attack of the Urumi is even more significant than any of the other weapon moveset differences I have already covered. Something interesting to note though is even if you happen to land both hits of the charged heavy attack, you will be doing less poise damage than the regular charged heavies. I don't think this is that significant though, because the main point of the charged heavy attack is the reach and the damage. Alright, let's start with the Giant's Red Braid, which is the only whip that scales more to strength than dexterity. Its weapon art, Flame Dance, sweeps a very wide radius and is good at killing multiple mobs. You can also cancel the weapon art by dodging in the middle of your casting. However, the entirety of the 25 FP cost is paid at the very beginning, so there is incentive to finish casting the whole weapon art. One thing to keep in mind is that it takes a lot of stamina to finish the full weapon art. Even if you finish the entire weapon art, the overall single target damage is not that high, nor is the DPS, considering how long you're swinging the weapon around for. It also doesn't give you any hyper armor while you're swinging, nor does it do high poise damage. So my conclusion is, the weapon art looks very cool, but overall I don't think this is a powerful weapon. It is also very awkward if you're trying to power stance this with another whip, because all other whips scale better to dexterity. The Magma whip Candlestick is the shortest whip by far, but it makes up for its length by doing good damage and decent poise damage with its weapon art, Sea of Magma. The attack radius is not as wide as the Flame Dance, but compared to other weapon arts, it is still plenty wide. The Magma left behind on the ground also deals decent damage, so this weapon is pretty good for AoE. Its DPS is also significantly higher when compared to the Giant's Red Braid. Also, if you start this weapon art and get interrupted, the Magma still swings out for the first hit, which can come in quite handy. Overall, I would recommend this over the Giant's Braid if you're trying to play with some faith scaling whip. The attack rating of the whip itself scales better to dexterity though, even if your Magma damage is related to your fire damage, which scales based on your faith. That's all for the unique whips. The regular whips include the Hoslo's Petal Whip, Thorned Whip, Urumi, and the regular whip. Now you might ask, why the heck are we going through the regular whips if you said the charged heavy attack of the Urumi is great? While the Urumi has a great moveset, it does not necessarily have the best stats. For someone holding it in the offhand, there can be a better choice. Not to mention, everyone plays the game differently, so if you don't like the Urumi's heavy attack, or if you want to power stance whips, we definitely need to take a look at the other whips. Heavy and fire infusions for whips are inferior to Keen and Lightning. Not only do whips scale better to dexterity, they also have higher dexterity requirements. I don't suggest using either of these infusions at all, especially because we can sort of eliminate the Giant's Red Braid as a strong option. But I'll still show a page of each in case you want some rough numbers. Next is the Keens and Lightning option. Urumi actually has the highest AR here, but it is missing 55 bleed versus Hoslo's. Urumi actually has S scaling on Keens. When you compare it to its Lightning version, you can clearly see that the Urumi is superior on Keen infusion. It has higher AR on Keen without going through split scaling for Lightning. The Hoslo's gets a better benefit for being on Lightning while low on dexterity. But if you end up with an 80 dexterity build, I would definitely suggest Keens for PvP. It's hard to get over this split scaling deficit even in PvE, unless the monster you're fighting happens to be weak to Lightning. As for quality, it is a weak infusion as usual for meta PvP levels, and better for maxed out stat PvE. However, in this case, Keen Urumis actually beats a 99 strength 99 dexterity Urumi in terms of raw stats. This is quite a rare case, but yeah. Not much to say about quality other than it kinda sucks for whips, because if you do have maxed out stats, other infusions are probably better options too. Magic infusion for a whip is probably something you won't really be seeing much of. Why? Because magic infusion tends to be for mages who are trying to use some weapon art that scales to intelligence, or to improve the damage of the weapon by not having to invest in another stat. The thing is, whips have far less options for Ashes of War. If you were simply using it for casting a weapon art, you would choose another weapon type. But since you selected whips, that means the whip moveset is quite important to you, and if that is the case, Cold Infusion is far stronger. Whips have quite the range with the correct moves and is quite good at applying status effects. The whips still scale better to dexterity than intelligence for cold whips, so investing in dexterity is likely still your play. But I did provide the intelligence counterparts in case casting spells is also going to be part of your repertoire. The Flame and Sacred infusions are nothing special either. If you want to play Faith while offhanding a seal, it is an option, but the split scaling makes the whip damage not particularly great. And I already mentioned that whips have limited weapon arts. Overall, I don't think this option is that good, especially when you're killing Urumi's scaling. It works a bit better for the Hoslo's whip though. Poison is actually a fairly decent option for Hoslo's pedal whip, especially when you're trying to offhand. If you choose to use a blood-infused Urumi, you have more than enough blood buildup that you can spare your offhand status effect for poison. It works better than another bleed Hoslo because bleed infusion overwrites the Hoslo's original bleed, while still having the same attack deficit. I'd say go for poison infusion on Hoslo and blood infusion on Urumi. The other whips like the previous infusions are just weaker than either of these two whips. As for Occult, if you want to play a bleed-based Hoslo, an Occult Hoslo is actually stronger than blood-infused Hoslo because you lose a bit of bleed buildup for a lot more attack. But the problem with Occult infusion for Hoslos is stat efficiency when it comes to Powerstancing. Something I have to talk about is Powerstancing when it comes to optimizing whips. Powerstancing is a bit more complicated for whips because of the difference in base attributes of the whips. Urumi is probably the best main hand choice because of the charged heavy attack. However, Hoslo is better as an offhand choice. Yet, if you want to play pure bleed for example, it would be better to make Urumi blood infused, while Hoslo Occult infused if they were on their own. But these two infusions maximize their effectiveness differently, with Occult leaning more towards arcane investment, and blood leaning towards dexterity investment. Therefore, I honestly suggest Hoslo to either go poison or cold. Poison scales the exact same way as blood. While in terms of status effect, I would say cold is better than poison. However, if you mainhand a bleed Urumi, a poison infusion scales the same way as a blood infusion. So you can get more out of your stat investment, since cold would require you to invest in some intelligence. Poison also has more potential for different combinations, like with the Kindred of Rot's Exaltation Talisman. Therefore, I think they're about as viable. Let's do a quick summary. For whips, Urumi is probably your best main hand choice, especially for PvP. Keen, Cold, and Blood Infusion are all good options. As for the offhand, Hoslow's Petal Whip is your best bet, with either Cold or Poison. You can also choose to use double Occult Hoslows if you don't want Urumi as your main hand. And finally, I also consider the Magma Whip Candlestick as an okay option because of its weapon art. But mostly for PvE though. Like and subscribe. Krite, signing out.